Hey everyone, we are at GTC 2015, or the GPU Technology Conference as put on by NVIDIA, and today NVIDIA just unveiled in official capacity their Titan X video card. This is a $1,000 video card that is intended for single GPU gaming solutions at high resolutions, and the card was originally teased at GDC 2015, which was about a week or two ago, and here we have the full specifications, the price. We have benchmarks forthcoming as soon as this event ends, and it's pretty interesting for a high-end flagship card, especially a Titan one, and we'll go over that momentarily. So while I'm talking here, I'll splice in some B-roll from the show floor just so you can check it out. But the main items with the Titan X, going over all the hard specs, are that it's got 3072 CUDA cores. That's about 1,000 more than the GTX 980, which had 2048 on the GM200 chip. And the Titan X is using a GM200 chip, so this is the new iteration of a Maxwell chip. It is still using Maxwell. It's also operating at 192 gigatexels per second for the texture filter rate, which is a technology I described on the YouTube channel previously. You can search the channel for texture filter rate for that information. And it's got a 336.5 gigabyte per second memory bandwidth. So this memory bandwidth is actually the same or very close to the 780 Ti, which was released a generation ago. And it's much higher than the GTX 980. The reason for this in large part is because NVIDIA has largely changed their architecture between Kepler and Maxwell. Maxwell's CUDA cores are about 40% more efficient in terms of power per watt, or performance per watt, I should say, than Kepler. So Maxwell, 40% more efficient than Kepler. That's very important to note because when comparing things like CUDA core counts, it's not a linear comparison between the two architectures. With that noted, there are more ROPs and TMUs on the GTX Titan X than previously on the 980. It's got 12 gigabytes of video memory, and this is a single bank, effectively, of 12 gigabytes. Some video cards will advertise 12 or 16 gig of RAM, but it's actually two banks of 6 or two banks of 8 in either of those cases, and that's because those video cards have two GPUs on a single card, so it's a 2 GPU single card solution in those instances. In the case of the Titan X, it is a single GPU, single card solution using the GM200 chip, and it's got all 12 gigabytes of memory reserved for that single chip. The main benefit of having so much memory and such a large memory interface, which is 384 bits in this instance, with that 300 plus gigabyte per second memory bandwidth, is higher resolutions and pushing more pixels. So when you push more pixels, what I'm really talking about is running at a 4K resolution or multiple monitors at a similarly high resolution. And the Titan X is advertised by NVIDIA as being a high-end solution for 4K gaming that can actually play games with a single GPU at 40 FPS or better in some instances. And I'll go over those benchmarks momentarily. You can see them on the screen now. Earlier I said that the Titan X is a little interesting, and the reason for this is because the Titan line has traditionally been targeted at researchers and scientists and people doing simulations. It's not quite the same market as a Quadro card for the Titan Z, for instance, but the Titan Z was pushed as a high-end, very expensive research solution, and it's fully double precision enabled. The Titan X, which is the new one, don't get them mixed up, is not fully double precision enabled. It is actually 1/32 the throughput of single precision for DP on the Titan X, and it's got 7 teraflops of single precision performance. So the Titan X is not being pushed as a research card. It is being pushed as a gaming and media production card. People who do media production like we do, except at a higher quality, not in a hotel room on YouTube, will benefit from something like a Titan X because it is a semi-affordable at $1,000 solution that's got a lot of processing power and a lot of CUDA cores for CUDA-enabled applications like Adobe Premiere. The technology of the Titan X is effectively the same as what premiered on the GTX 980 and previous Maxwell chips, so it's supporting MFAA, which is NVIDIA's multi-frame sampled anti-aliasing alternative to MSAA. It's a bit more efficient and produces effectively the same visual result. It's got VXGI, or voxel global illumination as they call it, support for their time warp technology for virtual reality, and all that stuff. Nothing has changed on this front, so you can check our GTX 980 review for that technology if you're unfamiliar with any of it. The Titan X is marketed as being an overclocking solution as well. The TDP of the base Titan X is 250 watts. It runs at about 1,000 megahertz base clock, so a bit lower base clock than the GTX 980. 1,075 megahertz boost clock, much lower boost clock than the GTX 980. And it's at 250 watts, that's 100% of the power target percentage. If you increase it by 10%, which you can do in Maxwell overclocking, I've got a video on that also on the channel. Increase it by 10%, now your max TDP is about 275 watts, so that does give some room for play if you're an overclocker. NVIDIA reports that internally they were able to push about 1.4 gigahertz for the clock. They didn't specify if that was boost or base. That is almost definitely the boost clock. That's just how these overclocks are measured, especially when they're that high. So it is a capable card for overclocking in theory, but ultimately the question here is whether this card is meant for you, and we are reviewing this card. It was shipped. We're getting it after GTC, unfortunately, so I don't have the benchmarks today. Other sites do. Go check them out, see if you're interested in it. But here's the thing. Regardless of the benchmarks, the GTX Titan X is $1,000. It's a single GPU solution that performs very well for things like 4K, according to the internal benchmarks I've read so far. But if you're on 1080 or 1440, there's no reason you should buy this video card. Maybe if you're planning to upgrade in the future, but if you're planning to upgrade in the future, then our general philosophy on the website is that you should make all the purchases at once and just save it up, because we don't know how technology will change in the next year or two. The Titan X is an impressive technological feat. It's got a lot of cores packed into the same space. It has a nice looking finish with the aluminum chassis and all matte black paint. I am partial to the previous color of the 780 Ti and the 980, but the Titan X is a nice mix-up. But for gaming, it's a bit much. There are very few instances where you will need a card like this to play games, and even in 4K, not many games are optimized for 4K yet, and I don't just mean performance, I mean visually, because if you look at the user interface in games, when you run them in 4K, it's sort of like forcing it. The interface will have very tiny font and very tiny UI, because the developers, and this is on the developer side more than on the technology hardware side, the developers just haven't built for it yet because not enough people are playing 4K. That will change in the future, probably, going forward, but it's something to note. It's worth noting, just like with SLI, when that was new, it was worth noting that you'd be disabling one card 50% of the time or more because developers hadn't optimized for it. So same instance here with 4K, except it's visual. At the end of the day, if you're a media production professional, it is definitely worth looking into the Titan X. If you're a gamer, on the enthusiast side, sure, look into it. If you're a gamer who's just playing games and not necessarily overclocking, and you don't consider yourself an enthusiast, you don't need the newest thing, probably buy something more affordable, unless you've just got so much money burning a hole through your pocket that you need to get rid of $1,000. That's not to say it's a bad card. It's just to say that for gaming intentions at lower than 4K resolution, there's not much justification for a $1,000 purchase right now, especially with the 980 doing as well as it does, and with even AMD's 290X performing pretty well with high-resolution gaming at a much more affordable price. So that's sort of the roundup of all the information. Check out some benchmarks online. Check ours when they're up next week. We'll have some pretty unique benchmarks that others probably won't be producing immediately. So do stay tuned for all of that, and then you can find out if it's a good card for your needs. Still cool technology. We'll have more technology and other cool stuff for you coming out of GTC 2015 here this week. Stay tuned to the channel for more, and I will see you all next time.